Good morning. Well, we'll get that working in a minute. While we're waiting, Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you. Anyone actually keep their commandments? Their commandments, listen to me. Resolution, New Year resolution. Has anyone actually kept that in all of 2016? Liar, liar, liar. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I can keep mine. I don't make one.
You don't make one? That's a good way to do it. Well, you know, it's funny. I actually was able to keep a couple of my commandments. The first one was, I keep saying commandments. Resolution. I resolved to not be perfect. That was really easy. That was like no effort whatsoever. And the second one, my resolution was to drive by a fitness center at least 3 times a week. And I was able to do that too. What a great year it was. A friend of mine, and I'm not making this up, one of his resolutions was, I will take fewer baths and showers in order to conserve water. We did not spend a lot of time together this year. Just amazing. But if you want to get serious, we talk about New Year's resolutions all the time, and they are important. The calendar does not need to say January 1st in order to think of change. And we are always changing, positively, negatively. We talked a little bit about this in class this morning. If we're going to get anywhere in life, you can't do anything by standing still. Status quo does not work, because even as you are standing still, it's not like the world stops rotating on its axis. But what do we do in order to foster that change? Well, a lot of it has to do with our past. How do we react to our past? The way I see it, we could do it one of 3 ways. We could hang on to our past like grim death. Like it's the most exciting thing. Remember back in the day when we were in high school and we used to be the best football players and yeah, we were cool. Some people live in the past. Or some people try to just forget that the past ever happened. I'll be honest, there are some things that I am not proud of that I've done in my life. And I would love to delete them from the record books. It's not going to happen. As the saying goes, he who forgets history is deemed to repeat it. So there's something in the middle. What I like to think of is remembering the past, not focusing too much on it, using it really as a guide. How can we learn, based on what we've done in the past, to live in the moment? It's not easy. 2016 is over. You don't get a redo. And look, obviously, I'm probably the least qualified person here to talk about the events that happened in this church in the last year because I wasn't here. But I do know this. If we're going to move forward as a congregation, if you're going to move forward individually, you got to let it go. It's done. There's nothing you can do about what happened yesterday. There's nothing we can do about what happened 2016, whether it was good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. We have to focus on today. I'm going to talk very, very briefly about Job. We're taking a break from the fruits of the Spirit. Job is 42 chapters long. We would be here forever if we talked about it in its full entirety, of course. But Job is a man who had to go through some change. Now, there are a lot of biblical examples. This is not an exhaustive list. Some were positive, some were negative. We're going to talk about Job, so I'll leave that alone for now. Rahab, who knows what Rahab was? Remember Rahab's profession? She was a prostitute. It's not a great way to start a life. So she was that, and then of course Joshua came and she helped house his spies and really changed her life to the point where she ended up in the lineage, only one of only 5 women in the direct lineage of Jesus Christ. How about that? And then Joseph, of course, Joseph went from the pit to the palace. You could say Peter. Remember, Peter could not He was so impetuous and rash, and he was anything but steady. And he denied Christ 3 times. He just said what was on his mind. He shot first, he asked questions later. Then he ended up being the rock that Jesus could rely on. Does anyone know how Peter was martyred? Upside down. Why was he martyred upside down? He felt he was unworthy of dying in the same way as Jesus. How about that? And then Moses, of course, went from reluctant recipient to spectacular servant. If you ever get in a situation where your anxieties are getting the best of you, remember, Moses started out a basket case. Wait for it. Negative change. King Saul. Tall, dark, and handsome. The very first king of Israel. Didn't turn out very good for him. Judas Iscariot. Need I say more? We've talked about Cain in our Sunday morning class for a long time. I won't get into all the details, but Cain had to have some change of heart in order to commit the very first murder. And then Lucifer. Do you realize Satan wasn't always bad? You know what Lucifer means? Angel. It means day star or morning star. Isaiah talks about it in chapter 14. Of course, pride led to his downfall. So there was a lot of positives. There was a lot of negatives. Again, this is hardly an exhaustive list. When we are changing, we're not standing still. Has anyone been to a high school reunion anytime recently? All right. Has anybody ever been to a high school reunion? There we go. And Amber's sitting there like, man, I just graduated like 3 days ago. What are you talking about? But, we just, the Lower Merion class of 1991, which was me, we just had our 25th anniversary, or reunion, what was it? This past November, but it was when I was coming here, so I wasn't able to go. But I actually thought it would have been a good idea, and thanks to Facebook, you can see all the pictures. If you go to a reunion like this, it can be simultaneously frightening and exhilarating. I read a story about a man named William. He was about to attend his 40th high school reunion, and this is before the days of social media and Facebook and all that. He was so excited. He lost touch with everyone. He was on the other side of the country. And he was wondering, what is everybody like? What do they look like? What are their jobs? Have they encountered this Jesus Christ that I encountered? And he couldn't wait. And he saved money, and his friend Jack drove him to the airport. He said, I'll pick you up on Sunday. Sunday came. Jack's at the airport. And out comes his friend William, who is so depressed and so dejected. And he's so discouraged. And he's so despondent. And it's one of those awkward silences in the car for the first 20 minutes until finally Jack says, so, how was the reunion? And William says, Jack, it was the most depressing experience of my life. Well, what happened? It wasn't what happened. It's what didn't happen. It had been 40 years. 40 years. And not one of them changed a bit. Sure, they changed clothes. Some gained weight, some lost hair, some had jobs and had children, but they were the same people. And he could hardly get his thoughts together. And he said, the most depressing thing about this is that people choose not to change. He said, Jack, life is way too valuable. It's too short for me to ever remain stagnant like that. If you ever see me doing that, give me a swift kick, or I deserve it for Christ's sake. And then he said something that has been with me ever since I read this story. I hope you'll love me enough to challenge me to keep growing. Let me repeat that. I hope you'll love me enough to challenge me to keep growing. Think about that. I'm saying that as him, but I'm also saying that as myself. And I hope we're comfortable enough with each other here that we have no problem saying that. It's not about saying the right thing. It's not about being politically correct. People are so worried that, well, I don't want to hurt this guy's feelings by calling him out on his sin. Well, you're not doing him any favors. You realize that, right? Don't worry about people's sensitivities. Don't worry about people being offended by things. Well, yeah, keep that in mind, of course. But at the end of the day, it is far more important to love someone enough to challenge them. You think everything I say to my kids is all lovey-dovey and you're the best? Of course not. You ask them, they would say no. It's because I love them, that I want them to keep growing. And yet it's challenging. None of us have it figured out. Job, good old Job, was a man who had to keep growing. Is everybody at least somewhat familiar with the story of Job? Because we're going to give the extreme Reader's Digest version. If you read Job, it really brings up a couple interesting things. First and foremost, belief in God. Does belief in God solve the problem of evil? Audience participation. Does belief in God solve the problem of evil?
No.
No. In fact, I would say belief in God actually causes the problem of evil. It's the reason for it. It creates it. Well, how can you say that, preacher? Well, if you're the neighborhood atheist, every neighborhood has one, by the way, or if you're an agnostic, you don't believe in this stuff, then guess what? The problem of evil, it's not a problem. People are crazy, and that's why planes go into buildings, and so there's no God, no big deal. But what about us? What about you? What about the Christians? What about the born-again believers? What about people with faith like Job? Well, then how can you reconcile all this bad stuff happening in the world? How can you reconcile the existence? How can you defend God after what you saw last night in Turkey with yet another shooting? And it's called a theodicy, Theos. It's Greek for God. It just means defending God, defending the Lord in a world that really has gone crazy. And that's what we're about in Job's book. Because he has to deal with this. Now, Job, the name Job actually means persecuted, hated, and the assailed one. He should have seen it coming. But in reality, God himself describes him as blameless, upright, a man who shuns evil, a man who fears God. He's the greatest in the land. This is what God says about Job. So here comes Satan. He comes up to God and says, you know what? No, it's no wonder that Job fears you. Look at all he has. And this is Job had a lot of things. A lot of money. He had a lot of family. Everybody was healthy. Life was going great. It's this time when it's easy to honor God. But Satan then says, does Job fear God for nothing? If you take away his prosperity, I'm willing to bet, says Satan, I'm willing to bet that his prosperity, that this righteousness turns into bitterness. You think about this. When we undergo something extraordinarily tragic, when we have to go through the death of a loved one, or the loss of a job, or some physical diagnosis, it is at that point, even if it's just for a little bit, that if we're being honest with each other, we see God as an enemy. Even if it's just for a little bit. When that happens, when God appears to be against us, how does our faith even stand? Think about it. Is our faith strong during these times, or is it like everything else? And it's all about the environment and the circumstance. Job's about to find out. What does God do to Job? Well, in a nutshell, let's see. And by the way, Satan needs God's approval in order to do this. Loses his oxen, loses his donkeys, loses his servants. That's bad. Okay, but it gets worse. Take away Job's sons. Take away Job's daughters. Take away his house. Meanwhile, Job's sitting there. This is all happening like boom, boom, boom. What did I do to deserve all this? And if that's not bad enough, you know what, Satan? Make sure he's afflicted head to toe with these disgusting sores, these painful sores. Check. So poor Job. And then his wife comes, and this is another story altogether. What does she say to him? She says, how can you still maintain your integrity? Curse God and die. What a supportive statement that is. And it gets better because you've got Job's friends. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and then Elihu comes later. These guys did a wonderful job until they opened their mouths. Sometimes you just need to be there for someone, a little pat on the shoulder or a hug, without thinking that you know everything, like these guys did. So, long and short of it is, they went back and forth. Well, Job, obviously, you did something wrong, therefore you deserve everything that happened to you. But if you just repent, God will help you out, and blah, blah, blah. And Job's saying, what are you talking about? Of course, this is retribution theology 101. We've discussed that in here before. Finally, this goes on, and we won't get into it. Finally, God intervenes, and he says, you know what, I've had enough of this nonsense. So let's go to 40, Job 41 through. This is God's first speech. The Lord said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. Then Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. So Job, he confesses his smallness, okay, but what he doesn't do is embrace God, at least not yet. And at the end of this little verses here, I will say no more, he says. So it's like he's being petulant. God, I'm just going to give you the silent treatment. And you can see God saying, whoop-de-doo, Job, great. So finally, God says, I'm going to try to get through to you one more time. And he's saying, when anything good happens, Job, I'm still sovereign. When anything bad happens, I am sovereign. When there's chaos in the world, guess what? I'm still sovereign, and I am still omnipotent. After a few more speeches, Job starts believing. He experiences true conversion and true change. Let's look at the turning point in 42, 1 through 6. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You ask, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak, I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. What do we see here? Well, for one thing, Job turns the attention from himself to God. The moment of truth, which is the title of the sermon, you see it right there in 5. That's why it's green. My ear, he has heard of God, but now he actually sees him. He embraces him. He is so encouraged by this. He experiences God that he can't help but mix in praise with humility. Job's finally praising God, but also he's becoming humble. And as we'll see in a second, his friends experience this humility as well. And I gotta say, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. You can disagree with God all you want, and it's fine to disagree. You're allowed to shake your fist at God. He's a big boy, and I think he can handle it. We don't have to like his decisions. We don't have to like what goes on in our worlds. But at the end of the day, he's going to do it anyway. We spend so much time, and I'll say, and by the way, I'll say I, because, in this profession, I read a lot of books by scholars and these so-called experts, and people spend so much time putting question marks where God has placed periods. Like, we know more than he does. And look, we are all guilty of that sometimes. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And God, beyond any shadow of a doubt, is telling Job and his friends, look who's in control. And I'll give you a hint. It's not you. So he embraces God's presence. He's aware of his limitations. And now he encounters God. Now, am I telling you we should never lament because it's wrong? Of course not. It's fine to say, why me, God? Why do these things happen? Why do the tragedies of the world continue to happen, God? You don't have to have all the answers. But one thing I think is necessary. If you're going to lament, and David did this a lot, and now we see Job. If you're going to lament to God, praise him as well. Is it easy to do that? When you're going